So now let's turn to your really instructive and fascinating book, A Prague Winter, a personal story of remembrance and war, 1937 to 1948. As the title suggests, it's really two books at least. It's the birth and the history of Czechoslovakia, its rise to independence in 1918, then being treacherously torn apart in 1938, the Munich Pact, its fate a year later with the Nazi protectorate, and then, of course, becoming a communist satellite. And the second part, all intertwined with this wonderful history, it's a very personal history of your family and the discovery of your Jewish heritage. You discovered many documents, both through archaeology in your own garage and official documents about your family archived in many unknown files. Tell us about this research and your personal involvement with the research.
Well, as you pointed out, I did not know about my background, and I didn't really know it until I start the book by saying I was 59, and I thought that I knew who I was and that I really knew a lot about the country of my birth. As it turns out, neither was true. And so what happened was when I was named to the United Nations, all of a sudden there were profiles and things written about me and TV profiles. And even though I'd had a semi-public life before that, all of a sudden I kind of appeared on the public stage. And I started getting letters from people, some of them which said, send money or get me a visa. But others were the kind that some of them were written in Czech, some of them were written in completely indecipherable handwriting, and they basically didn't have the facts right, or they'd have a name, but they didn't have the dates, or somebody would say, I knew your father in high school in 1915, which would have been impossible since he was born in 1909. In 96, towards the end of the year, I got a letter from somebody where all the names and facts and dates were right, and it was just as I was being vetted for Secretary of State. So I was in the White House counsel's office, and they asked kind of the normal question, like, have you paid your taxes, and do you have a nanny, and things like that. And so
a legal nanny.
Right.
Right.
And at the end, they said, is there anything about you that we should have asked that you might want to tell us? And I said, well, I have just learned that it's possible that I am of Jewish heritage. And they said, so what? The president is not anti-Semitic. Right. So I then, over the holidays, talked to my children who were completely fascinated by it, and they already knew that their grandparents were foreign and that they spent a lot of summers with them, and they said it just kind of added the whole aspect of the story. My youngest daughter's married to a Jewish man, and we were just all talking about it all. So, okay. But then what happened, you're not allowed to talk to the press between the time that you're named and the time you're confirmed. But what happened was Michael Dobbs, a very good reporter from the Washington Post, wanted to do a profile of me. And so my office gave him names of people that he might talk to in Europe. And so on the day that I was confirmed and was sitting in my office, he came, and it was a stunning day in terms of giving me photographs of people and said, do you know who this is? This is your cousin. She died in Auschwitz. And these are documents. The Nazis were really good about keeping track of everything in terms of cards that showed what transport people went on. I was completely stunned, disbelief. And so the only way I can describe it was that I was asked to represent my country in a marathon, the first time a woman had done this. Right. And I was given a very heavy package to carry, not only to carry, but to unwrap as I ran. That's how I felt. So I asked my brother and sister to go to the Czech Republic to begin to unearth things. And they ran into a fantastic man, Thomas Kraus, who was head of the Jewish community in Prague. And that was the beginning. Okay. So there was some documentation that came from that. Then what happened was I felt that I needed to know more and understand the whole story better. And so we did begin. I went back to the Czech Republic, What was interesting was the Czech Foreign Ministry gave me my father's personnel file, and there was an institute established in Prague for the study of totalitarian governments, and they had charge of all the secret police records that the communists had amassed. So they gave me my father's secret police file, which many, many times accused him of being a pro-Western Democrat. So those were the things I worked off of. Then because we'd spent the war in England, I also went back to England and went to the places we'd lived. And then when I was in the Czech Republic, I went yet again to Terezín, where in fact most of my family had been sent. So, and then my garage, which really, I'm embarrassed to say I should be on one of those programs about pack rats or...
we all have these, yeah. So you've said many times that you wish that you could have spoken with your parents and asked them the reasons why they made the decisions they did, how they did it, why they did it. You were very close to your father. It must have been very hard both for him not to reveal this side of your family's life and for you not to have discerned that in him. Do you imagine the conversations between your parents and their parents and other family members that led to you leaving your homeland and your eventual baptism into Catholicism?
I do, but it's all speculation.
Of course.
I think the thing that is very hard, is I was talking to one of my older cousins in order to do research for this book, and she said something about when I talked to grandfather, and I thought I had never called anybody grandfather or grandmother, babička and dědeček in Czech. It was not so for me, my grandparents I knew people had grandparents, but I did not, we left when I was 2 years old, and there's a photograph in there with my two grandmothers, but they were not anybody that I actually knew. I knew about them a lot because, and this is the part that makes this so complicated, my parents talked a lot about their parents. I mean, I knew what kind of people they were.
Yeah, because you say at one point in the book how much your father loved his mother. He really adored his mother.
Very much, and his father was an entrepreneur and somebody in the construction business, and also someone that had started a factory that actually employed a lot of people in the little town where they lived. My mother's parents, he had a wholesale shop in their little town, and I think they were fairly well-to-do business people. From what I can tell, it's always hard to separate it, what I know now, from I did not know about their religion at all. But from talking to people now, I have sorted out that they were probably very secular Jews. Yes. And Thomas Krauss, who was kind of our guide through this, said that in many ways the Jews in Czechoslovakia were probably more secular than some of the Jews that were further to the east. And also, I found among the various documentations was either given or found, on my parents' wedding certificate, it said under religion, it's a Czech term, bez vyznání, which means without confession. Right. And it doesn't mean that they're atheists, it's just that they did not belong to a church. So my sense was that they came out of that particular background. And also what I think, and this is corroborated by other readings that I've done, is that nobody imagined that the barbarism that the Nazis undertook really could happen. So Munich was in September 1938. The Nazis marched in March 1939, and my parents left shortly after that. And so I think that people didn't imagine that things would be so terrible. The other part that's all of a sudden become kind of clear to me, my parents were very young when they left. My mother was 29 and my father 30. And I had just been born. So I think, because I don't know, my father really was a Czechoslovak patriot and wanted to be with the government in exile. And I have a sense that they were encouraged by their parents to go to England. And there was some thought that my paternal grandparents would join them. And my maternal grandmother, my mother had a sick sister and she wanted to stay with her. So those are the things I imagine. But it's all imagination because I obviously never had this conversation.
Right, right.